About a year ago, I bought this fully electric 2021 e-Niro second-hand for $40,998 drive away. At the time, it had a bit over 38,000 kilometers on the odometer, and it's now up to a bit over 68,000 kilometers. So I've driven it quite a lot in the past year on several long distance trips and a whole lot of local driving. And for the most part, it's been really good. This is my first EV, so I don't really have much other experience to compare it to. So a lot of the things I like about it are probably true of most EVs, but I still think this specific car is a really good car. It's comfortable, it's nice to drive, the performance is great. I mean, it's not a sports car by any means, but it can really take off quite fast with the instant EV torque. It has pretty much all the features you would expect in a modern car. A big touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The built-in navigation isn't great, but I prefer Google Maps anyway. It's got blind spot monitoring, adaptive cruise control with lane keeping, so it actually tries to keep you in the lane. And being able to charge at home instead of visiting a petrol station has been absolutely great. Public charging on road trips is slightly more challenging, but for all the local driving I do, I just plug it in at home, and it mostly charges on solar power, so the cost has been next to nothing. It has 450 kilometers of range on a charge, so not exactly the most longest range EV at all, but it is quite a bit better than some of the other more budget EVs out there. And even after 68,000 kilometers, I haven't really noticed any loss of range. I would have to assume there has been some degradation on the battery, just given its age and how much it's already driven, but it's clearly been very minimal because I haven't noticed anything. I've taken this car on multiple long trips. I've taken it on the ferry down to Tasmania and done a full lap of the island of Tasmania. I've driven it from my home in Melbourne up to Brisbane. I've taken it to the tiny town of Grongrong in central New South Wales, and I've done several other smaller trips in it as well. And I will say it's not the best road tripping EV out there, but it does quite alright. On the open highway, doing 110 kilometers an hour, the range is more like 350 to 300 kilometers, but that's about as far as I would ever want to drive in one stretch anyway. And so far I've had no trouble making it from charger to charger, even in fairly remote places. The charging performance, to be honest, isn't great. It tops out at 75 kilowatts and starts falling off a cliff of the charging rate at about 70%. So newer and higher end cars certainly charge a fair bit faster, but I can still get a fairly full charge in around 45 minutes. And I rarely ever feel like I'm just waiting around for it to finish charging too much, especially if the charger is in a town. I found I actually prefer chargers in towns. I can go for a walk around the town, buy anything I want, enjoy the town a bit. So it's really not that bad, but it would be nice if I could charge it a bit faster on road trips. Where this car really shines is with local everyday driving, preferably with home charging, but it is still more than capable of doing some long road trips when you want to. And it is a front-wheel drive car with fairly low ground clearance, so it's not at all intended for off-roading, but in total I've probably done about 200 kilometers on dirt roads, and apart from probably a very slight loss in efficiency, it's handled that perfectly fine. And I've also driven up and down a fairly uneven, grassed-over four-wheel drive track on quite a steep hill at my dad's bush conservation property, and parts of that definitely feel like it's pushing the absolute limit of both the ground clearance and the traction. But I've done it multiple times now without any issues, although I wouldn't want to try anything worse, and even after it's rained there, I probably would be pushing my luck as well, but it can certainly do that. There are a few little things that annoy me about the car. Most of these things I forgive due to the price, but some of them really wouldn't have cost any extra to fix. For example, When you're driving, there's no way to see the actual state of charge on the dashboard. It shows on the dashboard front and center when you're actually charging and the car is plugged in. But when the car is unplugged, all you see on the dashboard is the indicated range remaining and this kind of bar representation of how much charge is in the battery. But if you want to see the actual percentage that it's actually on, you have to come over here to the big screen and press the EV button down here, and then you can pull up the full state of charge on the screen here. But then you lose your navigation or anything else you might have had on the screen, so it is a bit annoying that you have to pull it up here. And really, if they just tweaked the software a little bit, I'm sure they could have quite easily shown the state of charge on the dashboard all the time. Another little thing that bugs me is the blind spot monitoring. I really like the little orange light that pops up on the wing mirror if there's someone in your blind spot or even just next to you in the lane at all. But what I don't like is if you turn on the indicator while there's a car next to you, it will make a very aggressive beeping noise. But sometimes you kind of need to indicate when you're trying to merge or something, even though there is a car there. And then it just sort of starts yelling at you the whole time you're doing that, even though you might be fully aware that there's actually a car right there. And sometimes if there's 2 lanes of traffic turning left or right or something, it will actually think I'm trying to move into that other lane, which is full of cars, and start yelling at me, even though I'm actually just indicating because I'm turning. Overall, it's not a huge deal. It doesn't happen all that often, but I can't find a way to turn just that noise off without turning off the whole system. And then I would lose the little orange lights on the mirror that warn me about someone in my blind spot. And I actually really like having them because I'm not very good at checking blind spots. It would also be nice to have some other things like wireless Android Auto and wireless phone charging, but I took care of that myself with some Amazon accessories. And ideally it would have things like heated seats and a sunroof and a heads-up display, but I realized that's probably not all that reasonable for a car of this price range. I am glad to have leather seats though, they just clean up so much better than cloth seats. Unfortunately, it also doesn't have V2L, which means you can't directly power anything from it, apart from small USB powered devices or things that can plug into a cigarette lighter. And that is a bit annoying, but I think that would have been a pretty advanced feature to have back when this car was made. And I do have a power bank that can power anything I want, and I can slowly charge that power bank from the car's 12-volt cigarette lighter plug. So it's not too much of an issue for me. It doesn't really put me out, but it would be nice if I could have just plugged something directly into the car to use power from this massive battery to power anything, especially during power outages. It also, unfortunately, doesn't have vehicle-to-grid or bidirectional charging capabilities, where you can export power from the car to power your house, or even feed power into the grid, which I really didn't care about at all when I bought the car, but vehicle-to-grid is now allowed in Victoria, and you can now install chargers that can do that, so that actually might have been a really nice thing to have, but it doesn't really affect the functionality of the car too much. It just means I can't use the huge battery for anything else. As for driver assistance, it's nothing super advanced, but it does have adaptive cruise control, which is really nice for longer trips. I would like it to be a bit more aggressive. If the car in front of me moves off so they start going faster, or if I change lanes to get around them, it takes quite a long time for the cruise control to get back to the full speed I've set it to, so I often end up sort of pushing the accelerator myself to give it a bit of a boost to get back up to speed. But overall it works really well, and you just sit on the highway and you don't really have to do that much. And it does also have lane keeping. It doesn't work great, but it tries. If you're driving manually, just completely normally, and you start to veer out of the lane, it will sometimes pull you back into the middle of the lane, or try to, but then when you engage cruise control, so cruise control is on, it basically tries to fully steer for you. If you let go of the wheel for more than about 15 seconds or something, I don't know, I've never really timed it, but it's not that long you get. If you let go of the wheel, it starts to flash messages on the dashboard, and then it starts to ding at you a little bit later. So you do have to keep your hand, at least a hand or even maybe a finger or something would do, on the steering wheel most of the time. And I would definitely want to keep a hand on the wheel anyway. If you're on a fairly straight road with no one around, it works quite okay, but it does kind of bounce around the lane from side to side a bit more than I would necessarily be comfortable with if there's a car in the lane next to me or oncoming in from the other direction or something. And it's also not very good at taking tight corners, but sitting on the highway on a long drive, it is just a bit easier rather than having to do all the steering yourself. You're just sort of holding the wheel, helping to keep it going the right direction. So it is doing some of the work for you. And I will sometimes take my hands off the wheel for a few seconds to just open a water bottle or something, because it's easier to do that with two hands. And for short periods on a straight enough road, it does actually stay in the lane quite okay. As for running costs, I mostly charge the car at home with solar, so you can kind of consider that free, or maybe you could say it's cost 3 cents per kilowatt hour, because that's the feed-in tariff here that we would otherwise get if the power went back to the grid instead of going into the car. But either way, it's either nothing or next to nothing, the cost of charging at home. Then there's public charging on road trips, which isn't exactly cheap, but I would say it's still only about 2/3 of what it would cost to do the same trip in a petrol car. And you can bring some of that cost down by obviously leaving home with a full charge and then staying in accommodation overnight that has charging. Then the other costs so far have been insurance, which has been wildly expensive for me, but I am a 22-year-old with no insurance history, so that's probably my fault, not the car's fault. There's also registration, but that's really the same as any car, so I won't even mention what the price of that is. And then we have servicing. I have had to get the car serviced twice so far, with all the kilometers I've done, and I think that is a bit over the top, but I cover all my thoughts and experiences on servicing so far in a different video, so you can watch that if you're interested in that. The final thing I should probably touch on is depreciation. It's something I never really thought about too much, but since I bought the car, multiple people have asked me if the car's held its value. And, well, I can't really say for sure what the car is worth now, unless I actually tried to sell it. But based on looking at the market now, I think it's probably pretty unlikely I'd be able to sell it for what I paid for it. But that's not for reasons you might think. The car has held up perfectly fine, apart from maybe a small, tiny little amount of extra cosmetic wear. It seems basically as good as it was the day I bought it. But since I bought it, cheap cars like the MG4 and GWM Aura have had significant price cuts. So I bought my car used for about $40,000, which at the time I thought was a reasonably good deal. But you can now buy a base model MG4 brand new from $34,990 drive away. So for less money, you can get a brand new car that's maybe not quite as good as this, but it does mean this car would have more competition if I was trying to sell it. And at the same time, there's more EVs entering the used market at cheaper prices. I've seen a few Tesla Model 3s priced in the low 30,000s now. A lot of people are selling their Teslas now, but that's a bit beside the point. So while it doesn't really take away anything from how good the car is, if I tried to sell the car now, I'm just going to be coming up against more competition on the used market. Meanwhile, new EVs are getting cheaper and better, so more people would be looking at that. which is great for anyone looking to buy an EV, but it is less great for me if I was trying to sell this EV. For anyone to be interested in buying this car today, I'd probably have to settle for something like 30,000, so it'd be 10,000 less than I bought it for, but I really don't intend to sell it anytime soon, so I don't really care too much about the value at the moment. Right now, I'll just keep driving it and enjoying it. And as a side note, I think this car was originally sold for something like $60,000 brand new back in 2021, and I bought it for $40,000 through a dealer a bit over 2 years later, so the original owner presumably lost quite a bit of money on it. But when I was looking at buying this car, I saw a few Australian review videos, and they all kind of came to a similar conclusion, which is it's a great car, but it's not worth $60,000. And I kind of agree. Even when it was launched, you could get better, more advanced EVs for similar money, or similar EVs for less money, and the interior, while it's perfectly nice, and I'm quite happy with it, doesn't really feel like a $60,000 car, but luckily for me, I didn't have to pay $60,000 for it. And for the price I paid, I still think it was a really good buy. But that's about all I have to say. While I do have a few gripes, I've generally been really happy with this car, and I plan to keep it for many more years to come, and I'm even planning on taking it on a very long trip quite soon, but I'll talk more about that in a future video.